we're really excited to be able to provide some tips for increasing engagement during virtual learning. So what is the difference now? Our delivery model has definitely changed with the virtual piece being brought into play by COVID, and the need for a learning coach has come up with the need for an adult to assist with logging in, gathering materials, and setting up. And so our parents are definitely parents and caregivers, and sometimes siblings are being asked to be that learning coach. Some tips for the learning coach is that you want to gather your materials before the session. There are times when you're provided something that may need to be printed out, and you want to have those things ready before the session. You want to make sure that you plan and set up the session area prior to the session. You want to make sure the learner is dressed appropriately for the activities. And this can be different. If we're sitting at the desk, you may not have to have shoes on. If you're being asked to do some physical activities where you need to be able to work on your balance and those types of things, it's really important to have good shoes on and that school appropriate clothing for movement. You want, as the learning coach, to provide guidance prompts to the learner if they're needed during the session. And after the learning session with the student has completed, it's a really good time for feedback during the activities. You might want to add at the very end some time to talk and have questions with the teacher and provide feedback to the service provider, and just that open communication of what's going well, what needs to be adjusted. All those things help make sure the learner is getting what they need out of the session. We want to have those session resources available in the learner's environment. If we need, we might want to have alarms set on like iPads for the session, just to remind of the start time and the finish time. The service providers can communicate the list of materials needed to the parents prior to the session, so you're ready to have everything set up and ready to go. And when you have equipment or materials that you're using more than once, or if they're being used every day, you want to have some type of storage method for them, a shoebox, a special drawer, or a small basket, so that they're always accessible and organized and ready for the learner to use. And our physical therapist will talk about some positioning pieces.
Okay. So when we're trying to engage our learner, we want to make sure that they have an active learning position. And so this is a position where their knees are bent slightly from 90 with their feet on the floor. And then having them bend their trunk forward a little bit, it just helps to promote a dynamic structure for the body and the arms, and have the hands ready to engage in activities and tasks at the desk. Angela. The learner doesn't always have to stay seated at a table. The session could be dynamic with options for lying on the floor on their stomach and working on a task. They can be tall kneeling while working at a chair or at the couch or a coffee table, or they can be standing at a table or a desk while they're doing their work, and even having opportunities for some gross motor movements as needed. Some alternate seating besides a chair could be a ball like is in the picture, and if you have a crate, you can put it at the base of the ball to help it from rolling away from the child. You can also roll up a towel and position it behind the lower back, and this just encourages that weight shift forward into that active learning position that I talked about earlier. They can be sitting on the floor with their back supported against the wall and their legs extended. And they can put their laptop or iPad on the floor for virtual learning. And of course, like I mentioned before, they can stand at their desk. Some of our learners have a hard time knowing where they are in relationship to the video on the iPad or the computer. And so One thing that you can do to help your child know where to be so that they're in the screen is to place a marker on the floor. This can be a towel on the floor, or just put some tape, masking tape on the floor, or a hula hoop, anything that gives them a visual cue of where they can be and still be in the screen. We can also position the iPad or the computer, whatever the streaming device is, on the floor in the corner of the room. And that's a good position when you need a wide view of the room, particularly when working on gross motor skills, whether it's a PE class activity or a gross motor group activity. When you need a lot of space for the learner to move around, that's a good place to put the computer. And then, of course, you can feel free to move around with the learner and follow them, but don't chase them, but you can follow them with the computer if they have to move from room to room. It's important to keep
Can you say that one more time? I didn't hear like the next speaker.
Okay, I think Leslie is having some technical difficulties, so I'll just kind of hit the positioning of devices while she's figuring that out, okay? So more with positioning of devices, you can use a book or a computer riser to increase the height of the computer monitor or laptop so that it's at eye level. Sometimes it's more engaging for the learner to be able to look straight on to the computer than look down or off to the side. If you're having trouble with your tablet or cell phone keeping it upright, you can use a book to prop it. You can prop it upright against that. And then, of course, the tablet or cell phone in portrait mode is the best view for both parties. You can have the students share their screen to work on classwork on a shared Google Doc. That way you can both see what's going on.
Considerations and supports is our next section that we'll discuss. So some considerations and supports to consider when your child is on the Zoom session. You should try to designate a workspace for them to join in the sessions. You can use a video chat expectations chart that will give them a visual that they know what the expectations are for the Zoom sessions. You can use a visual schedule, and that will give them that visual they need to know what to expect on their schedule. You can use a visual, use a second camera as a visual to demonstrate the activity. That way all parties can see how the child is performing that activity. And also keep in mind that you can use a alternative seating position, standing. You can use, for example, a beanbag, the floor, the bed, just another, whatever position is going to work best for that activity that the child is working on. And then also use of a timer. That way that gives the child a visual so they know how much time is left for that session.
So we're going to look at technology tips now. Sorry for the pause, there's a little delay there. For the synchronous activities. So the first one is that you can mirror your iPad to the TV if you're going to be doing some of those larger movement activities where you might need to see it a little bit better. You can do that either using your built-in screen mirroring option on the iPad if you have an Apple TV. If not, there's a couple of other options. You can use either direct connect to your iPad, and you would need your Apple Lightning digital AV adapter and an HDMI cable. You can also stream it with another device such as the Roku, the Chromecast, or Fire TV, and you can mirror using that method. You might need like an extra app using one of those methods.
You can also sign into Zoom with 2 devices if the parent learning coach needs to see the activity at the same time as the student. You can sign in on your phone, your laptop, or a computer, and you would use the same Zoom link as your student.
And once again, like Allison had said before, if it's appropriate, you can place the device on the floor, you can put it in the corner of the room. I know she did a good job of covering that.
Also, if your student is deaf or hard of hearing, be sure to have your hearing aids or cochlear implants on during the session, and reduce background noise, like have the TV off or the music off, or even if there's loud kitchen appliances in the background, that can be distracting as well. And some hearing aids and cochlear implants have Bluetooth capability, and you would be able to connect directly to your device that you're using for Zoom.
Another option is you can use your speech to text feature on the iPad. So that's located in the keyboard, that's the microphone. And you can use that for any class chat boxes. If your learner has difficulty with typing or spelling, that might be a good way for them to participate. You can also adjust the pace of your YouTube video, and we've added those steps right here. They're pretty easy to follow, and then you can change it to whatever works best for you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some strategies for those learners that have difficulty engaging or staying engaged in the Zoom sessions. Sometimes our students just need more information, and it can be helpful if they have a social story that they read or is read to them before each session. It kind of helps them prepare and lets them know what the expectations are. And that can be something that can really help a student engage in the Zoom sessions. Also providing a visual schedule so they know what's coming next. They know what to expect. That helps a lot of students engage and remain engaged. We've also talked about visual timers. There's a lot of kids timers that you can get on the App Store. And again, that helps a student to stay engaged and be calmer because they know that it will end, and it gives them an idea of how much longer. And so it can help with that engagement piece. It's a little tip for a way to help keep a child engaged is you can sometimes trade places with them if they're having difficulty, where you change and let the learner be the teacher and you be the student. And so that can be another trick that can help keeping children engaged in the session. Sometimes learners don't like to see themselves on the screen. And so, of course, we can always stop the video on their little square, but sometimes there's a picture of them still for when the video is turned off. And so you can use a sticky tab to cover their picture if that bothers them and keeps them from being able to be engaged because they don't want to see themselves. Also, you could try letting them wear a mask. That could be kind of fun for them, a Halloween mask or some kind of superhero, something like that. If that helps them to engage, then that's another option of something to try. And other times, in particular, if they're doing a fine motor task or a craft activity or a writing activity, point the device just towards their hands, and they wouldn't be able to see their face. And then again, there's some unique opportunities at home that we get to use the environment of home that can help engage the child. And there's lots of sensory and motor experiences available that in the front and backyard. For instance, a learner could give a tour of their backyard. That can provide a lot of opportunity for making expressive statements and talking about things. It's also sensory experiences. It can help them come up with ideas to come back in and write about. They could give a tour of their bedroom, a tour of the kitchen. They could introduce you to their pets. So there's lots of opportunities, and we want to make sure that we can use that unique environment now that they're at home. Also, I just wanted to mention that there's also other things about the environment that we can take advantage of, because many times, especially with younger kids, we're saying work in the vertical plane, which means that straight up and down plane. And so we have windows and doors and showers and shower walls and refrigerators and cabinets and doors, all kinds of things that we can tape paper to and work in the vertical plane.
So another trick and tool that are great for our learners at home are movement breaks. And we do, when kids are at school, they have natural movement breaks built into their day, whether it's moving between classes, going to specials, even just moving within their classroom, moving to different stations in the classroom, moving from maybe a beanbag chair to sitting at their desk or standing at their desk, like the positions that Allison had mentioned earlier. But it's also important to note that, you can build in those movement breaks just throughout the day, even if it's for a 20-minute session with a therapist or a teacher, that maybe a student still needs a break. And so brain breaks are short 2 to 3 minute breaks from formal instruction in the classroom. And they certainly are needed at home for our virtual learners as well as our learners at school. So these activities use body movements to increase attention and activate the body for learning. They can also be used to wake up a learner who has become sluggish or has trouble concentrating. Activities can even be used to help calm down a learner who may need to relax from being overexcited. So here's a fun way that you can build in those movement breaks. Take a dice and have your child roll the dice and pick one of the activities that are listed on this fun little handout. And something that's good to keep in mind is, your children, and if you know they have a movement that excites them, that may not be the movement that you want them to do before a learning session. So maybe you want to pick an activity that's a little bit calming activity, like wall push-ups, for instance. So there's times when you can block some of the spaces on there if you don't think it's going to be an appropriate activity for your child, and encourage them to pick one that you think will help them focus for that session that they're going to be having with their teacher or therapist.
And we've included some resources, just some links that when the PowerPoint is shared, that we hope can give you some extra resources to go to, some extra tips. And I think that's the end of what we have. So if you ladies have any questions for us, we're ready to answer those.